Now, you've seen this video of Michael Jackson before, Slave to the Rhythm. What it shows you is a police state. What it shows you is Michael Jackson, but 5 years after his death. Now, what does it tell us? We'll later on basically come back to this issue of predictive programming. If you consider this, then it's basically a prediction of the society that we're basically heading towards. So from big data to AI, from marketing to mind control, and how to free the world and ourselves. Now this talk is to basically think out of the box. You've recently probably seen all those pictures related to the G20 meeting in Hamburg. So in fact, a lot of police, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of violence, and many people would maybe think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had Terminator and terminate all this violence, and create social order. But I can tell you one thing, Arnold Schwarzenegger also is in trouble. He's not that powerful as you can see in this letter. Do you notice anything particular in this letter? Where he's basically complaining that important reforms have been done and all sorts of unimportant stuff has happened. Do you notice anything in here? No? Look at this. And the take-home message of this talk is we are in big trouble. So, in fact, we are experiencing the perfect storm. Within just a few years, we're seeing cloud computing, big data, artificial intelligence, robotics, cognitive computing, Internet of Things, 3D printers, virtual reality, and quantum computers, and all this. It's all coming together. Each of these technologies can fundamentally transform entire business sectors, the economy, our society, and coming together, it's just the perfect storm, basically. So let's start with big data, and this is about you, because whenever you do something, this creates data traces when you go shopping, when you move, when you make friends, when you store files, if you send emails, if you read books. In fact, then you're being read, What are the books that you're interested in? How much time do you spend on a certain page? What comments are you making, and so on? Google claims to know what you think before you know it. Apple might be listening to what you're saying. And of course, you're being followed while you watch movies. If you had Google Glass, then one could see what you're seeing. In any case, if you have these kind of games at home, then it's watching you. And so why not also collect your genetic data and your microbiome, as we've just learned, right? So this is the time we're living in. All these data are being collected about you, and the question is, have you basically gone into a big trap? Some people think what we now need in times of future shortages of resources and the need to get sustainable and all this is basically something like a digital bantam panopticon. That means a place that collects all the data about all the resources and who owns them, who consumes them. And actually that bantam panopticon has been built previously, has been designed as the perfect prison. And we just need one guard. Basically, you couldn't see where he's looking at. He could look at any of those cells, and so basically it's a perfect control system. That's the idea behind this. And it's kind of concerning that some building of secret services and also companies are actually looking pretty much like a bantam panopticon. Right, so The Circle is a book that you should read and take very seriously. Now you might say, I'm taking care of my personal data, I'm not exposing myself. Who thinks this? Come on, nobody thinks you're lost. In fact, you can't, because whenever you're using a browser, cookies will watch you. If you don't accept cookies, you will not get the service. Even Web of Trust sold your clicks to companies. It's basically revealing everyone, including politicians. So there are companies that know everything about you. Just assume what can be concluded from all the links that you've clicked in the past 10 years. Then many people say, don't worry, because the Secret Service wouldn't be interested in me. I have nothing to hide. Who thinks this? Okay. Who has something to hide? So you are being targeted. All of you. When you read newspapers on the internet, basically 10 to 20 companies learn what you're reading. And so we are now living in a big data society. Within just 1 minute, 700,000 Google queries are being sent, 500,000 Facebook posts, and a lot of other data are being accumulated. And Chris Anderson had this dream: if we just had enough data, then quantity would turn into quality, and we wouldn't need science any longer, and no theory. Basically, the truth would reveal itself. And some people like to hear this, and they started collecting data like mad, and that's one of the reasons probably for mass surveillance, and they wanted to build something like a crystal ball that would allow you to see what's going on in the world in any place in real time, and even predict the future to some extent, at least, using predictive analytics. Now, is that dream working out well? That's the question. It sounds plausible. More data is more knowledge, and more knowledge is more power, more power, and more power is more success. But this magic formula doesn't always work, it turns out. And why is this? Because the more data you have, the more patterns will be in your data, accidentally. And so there are a lot of spurious correlations, such as this one: number of serial killers as a function of chocolate consumption. Now, if that was true, then living in Switzerland would be very dangerous. Here's another example, fitting to southern Italy: number of forest fires as a function of ice cream eating children. Very strong correlation, but if you would lock away ice cream eating children, it wouldn't reduce the number of forest fires at all, right? Now you would think, okay, that's not a serious example, such things could never happen in reality, but not true, actually. You know, one of the biggest success stories of big data analytics used to be Google flew trend. And then it turned out it didn't work well any longer for a number of reasons, and it had to be taken off the web, actually. Another example is 23andMe. You could send in a genetic probe and would get back a letter that would say, oh, you're likely to get this and that disease, and you might die of that. And it was taken off the market by the health authority, something that they don't do very often. Now, why is this? Because the results were not significant. They were sensitive. If you were sending your genetic probe to another company and the third one, and they were making also these tests and sending you back letters, then maybe you would die of something else, according to the letter. Now, in the meantime, the product is on the market, it has been adapted, but there's still this problem that some people should be really terribly ill according to their genes, but they're perfectly healthy. Shouldn't happen, but it does. Here's another interesting thing. the most livable cities in the world are not located, as you would think, in the leading IT countries. So what's going wrong here? I mean, they're always promising us paradise on earth. You know, have you understood what creates paradise on earth? We've just been discussing about human dignity. You know, in a data-driven world, if you cannot measure human dignity, it might just be forgotten. That's kind of the problem, but maybe that's the basis of the quality of life, right? So in fact, there was this meeting a year back on smart cities, and it turned out actually those technocratic solutions for cities didn't really work well. Mayors of cities weren't happy, citizens weren't happy, even in companies weren't happy because they couldn't sell their product as much as they liked. But in any case, you know, data is the new oil. It can make a lot of money, and you're the product. So the new kind of data mines people, mines you. You're being exploited now. It's not the mines, the gold mines. You are the mine. And personalized pricing is just one aspect of this. And if you think you would get the best deal on the internet, then of course you're terribly wrong, because now everyone gets a personalized price, and that depends on how expensive your computer was, and what your salary is, and your age is, and the country you're living in, all sorts of other things. So they would just take the maximum they can rip off you. And then there's this issue, knowledge is power. And many people want to have power, so they're trying to collect as much data as possible. Now, something interesting happened after I gave that presentation in Groningen a few years back, measuring the world and improving it together. I was talking about creating something like a pleasure nervous system run as a citizen web. And it took a long time for the video to be edited and uploaded, and I was very surprised. And I was also even more surprised about the feedback, because it said, this is what we call Skynet. Skynet. And so I was actually looking up what again was Skynet, because I really forgot about it. And it turns out that is part of this Terminator story. It's a global intelligence network that would collect all sorts of data and an AI layer on top of it, and would be kind of a system that would get self-conscious and take its own decisions. And here's another feedback that I got, which was pointing me to Genesis, which is another movie in the Terminator series. And I really recommend you to have a look at those Terminator movies, because it might tell us something about our future. You know, Judgment Day, Rise of the Machines, and Genesis. And it's said, I think, at least 5 times in that movie. Genesis, it's Skynet is Cyberdyne. Skynet is Cyberdyne. You know, it seemed to be sending a warning to the people, and in fact, it turns out Cyberdyne is a company that does exist in Silicon Valley, and the question, what is it really doing? You know, we need to be even more concerned, because it's now known that Pentagon, CIA, and NSA are influencing storylines of movies, and so they want to tell us something. And when I talk about predictive programming, it might just tell us this is the kind of future that they're creating for us, you know? And if you think, oh, that's all fantasy, then read this quote of CIA Director Gus Hunt, who said, "It is really very nearly within our grasp to be able to compute on all human-generated information. You're already a walking sensor platform," noting that mobile smartphones and iPads come with cameras, accelerometers, lie detectors, and geolocation capacities. You are aware of the fact that somebody can know where you are at all times because you carry a mobile device, even if that mobile device is turned off, he said. You know this, I hope, yes? Well, you should. In other words, they're sucking off data from all our devices. They're measuring us, they're mining us, as I said before. And then there's another element that comes on top of this, which is psychology or behavioral economics. It turns out that we're living in a completely new economy, and nobody told us, actually. This is called the attention economy. And the scarce resource is not anymore money. In fact, a lot of the services you get for free, but you pay with your attention. You know, pay attention. Yeah? That is the principle. That's the scarce resource that everyone is competing for, and that's why you're being overloaded with information. And what they're trying to tell you when you pay attention, well, buy this product, buy. And they're not saying it directly to you. They're using kind of your subconsciousness, because only 5% of information is consciously processed, and everything else happens unconsciously. That means it influences you, and you don't even know what has happened to you and why you did this and why you decided that. That you're rationalizing it maybe later on, but that's kind of the issue. You're being programmed. And how is this happening? It's happening through pictures. And now maybe you don't see something over here, but if you turn it around, it becomes more obvious, you know. And your subconsciousness would be able to see these patterns even without the lines in between, and make you respond to this, you know. That's why people use Facebook, right? And it's everywhere, you know. It's really trying to influence us by creating desires that you would then try to fulfill and compensate by consumption, basically, you know. And this is the kind of movies that you send your kids to, and then afterwards you're surprised that they're watching porn on the internet. So, we are being programmed. And here's actually a good example. The American anthem in the 60s had some text in it. But the letters were displayed not in the order in which the text was written, but in a different order that would create invisibly to your eyes, to your consciousness, these messages. Trust the government, God is real, God is watching, believe in government, rebellion is not tolerated, and so on and so on and so on. So, you know, in the 60s already, they were programming everyone in this way. And that kind of psychology was used to make people buy stuff that they didn't need and they didn't want. For example, by having attractive women sit on expensive cars. So you would buy an expensive car. And in the end, it was also used basically for the mass psychology, to create the mass psychology of this Hitler regime. And that, of course, was the start of the Second World War. And they do what is called predictive programming. So you're exposed to certain kinds of concepts and ideas to familiarize yourself with them and basically make you accept these kind of things. So, for example, to make you accept mass surveillance, they have Big Brother show, and you watch it and say, oh, that's funny, you know. And so you don't really take this seriously, right? Now, things become even more effective because it's being personalized. They're trying basically to hypnotize you, you know, a very effective way. And they're trying to find out really what makes your brain respond to certain kind of stimuli and to project certain kind of desires into your brain. And now there are companies that know better who you are and how you behave than your friends, your wife or partner, your family, and yourself. 300 Facebook likes are basically enough to predict your behavior better than your partner can do. And so these Facebook likes are very interesting data. Ted Cruz, for example, had the data downloaded, and he used that actually for his campaign as a secret weapon against the American people. What happens is that this kind of data is being used to identify your personality. So you're being put on a virtual psychological couch, you're being analyzed, and it turns out, for example, you're this kind of person, and you would be anxious, so they would send you messages about crime and terrorism and mass migration, all sorts of things that get out of control, and say, Trump will fix it. And then if you're a different character, however, they would send you a totally different message, and maybe just the opposite message, and also say Trump will fix it. But in principle, what's being done is everyone is being convinced one by arguments. It doesn't, of course, say what will happen politically later on. So it becomes possible to project certain kinds of ideas into your brain and make you take certain kind of decisions that would feel like your decisions. So you would think, I have taken this decision, but you were made to take this decision. And there are some interesting books about this, right? Now, it's not only being personalized in the meantime to every one of you, it's also being automated, and this is called persuasive computing or social computing. The idea has come up that society could be run like a giant machine. And you're just basically one of the pieces over there, and if the algorithm knows how you respond to certain kind of informational stimuli, then you could be made to behave in certain kind of ways. And in fact, countries like Singapore are experimenting with this, but it's not the only country. It's basically happening all over the world. So it seems like the automation of society is next. And how does it work? It's being, it's using deep learning and other machine learning algorithms, which is applied to big data, which is your data basically, and in the computer programs there would be a black box representing you that would learn to behave like yourself based on all the data stolen from your life, you know, the data that I mentioned before. So machine learning would make this digital double act alike, and that can be used basically to check out how you can be made to buy certain products, or to change your opinion, or to download a certain Trojan horse on your computer by clicking the wrong link and these kind of things. So, and it all started with this, with Skinner boxes, where they put animals inside and exposed them to rewards and to punishment to make them do certain kind of things, or not. So that's called conditioning. And now we are the experimental subjects, you know, the rabbits. The cages that we're held in are called filter bubbles. It's the personalized information that's built around us. We haven't noticed that this has happened, but you know, it's happening. It's basically limiting our thinking, it's at least guiding our thinking, and so it becomes more and more difficult to think out of the box. So Google, of course, is one of the companies who knows how to manipulate your choices with personalized information. And it didn't take long, and politics got terribly interested to use that also for their politics. And there it's called nudging. When combined with big data, it's called big nudging. Of course, nobody ever admitted that your personal data that has been stolen from you has been used to nudge you in a personalized way, but in the meantime, it's well known. And if you look at these kind of scenes, which happen every day, you could come to the conclusion, yes, actually, we are, to some extent, already being programmed. Here, two issues, one of MIT Technology Review, passive persuasion, it says everything, or Newsweek, brainwashed, you are being brainwashed, in other words, right? So read these books on mind control and social engineering and the art of deception to learn how today's society works. Some people were even so daring to say, well, if we can control everyone's behavior, couldn't we run the world like a chess game? So we would just need a giant chess computer basically to make you do all the moves to accomplish a certain political plan. So basically build chess computers to make you move around with your guns. So that's you basically. And in fact, these world simulations do exist, and one of them is called Sentient World, War Games on the Grander Scale. So you might think, why is this happening? Isn't that really crazy? Well, politicians want to govern more efficiently, and they'd like to have a digital sector basically make things happen. The idea is that now we can optimize the world, we can come up with a grand plan, and then basically take decisions like a benevolent dictator. Data would tell us what to do. Or govern like a wise king. And make consumers do the right stuff, behave more environmental friendly, behave in a more healthy way. So that was the idea. This is how politicians were convinced. And people say, if people have the choice between an apple and the chocomuffin, maybe we should present them the apple. We should put it first, because it's more healthy. But then in reality, it's being used actually to sell you all sorts of sugar lemonades, and the fifth pair of sport shoes, and all sorts of stuff that you don't need. And of course, every company wants to do this, and what happens is everyone is trying to influence your behavior, and it's like a family sitting in front of TV, and everyone wants to watch something else. So you can imagine how this ends, conflict of interest, and a fragmentation, at least a polarization of society, which is already on the way. So democracy is in danger. And that's why we've written this piece for Spektrum der Wissenschaft, end of 2015, digital democracy rather than data dictatorship. And it's maybe good to remind you what democracy is about. Many people don't seem to be aware. Many people have forgotten that these are the lessons of many wars and many revolutions. This is what we learned. So we shouldn't abandon this. Human rights, human dignity, freedom, self-determination, freedom to pursue your own path, pluralism, minority protection, division of power, checks and balances, participation, transparency, fairness, privacy, equal chances, justice, legitimacy, subsidiarity. All of that should be implemented in the digital society of the future. But it isn't, obviously, right? Now, people have warned that search algorithms can actually endanger democracy. They could influence elections. And in fact, it turns out that search engines have a bias. In many cases, a right-wing bias for whatever reason. And in fact, it turns out that social media and search engines have probably played a role in the Brexit decision in the UK and also in the US election. Now, what were the responses to this? Guardian said, well, the danger of big data is less democracy. Here, invasion of opinion bots is endangering democracy. Steinmeier, one of the highest German politicians, said there's a deadly danger for democracy. He's now our president. De Maizière, Minister of Interior, saw that we should do something against the opinion bots. Now, on the side of the people, they were very angry about Facebook's emotion manipulation study. Now, there are articles asking, is Facebook manipulating our thinking? So awareness is increasing. Is it feeding extremism? In fact, the Attorney General is now interfering with this, and there are more and more books now about these kind of things, like the programmed human, the rule, the formula to rule the world, the end of democracy, the smart dictatorship, and the weapons of mass destruction. This is about big data and algorithms and the ethics of influence. Cass Sunstein, one of the fathers of nudging, is now turning critical about the way this is being used. Tim Berners-Lee said, I invented the web and here are 3 things we need to change to save it. I'll read it because he was also referring to this. Tim Cook from Apple was criticizing Google and Facebook for the personalized services. Elon Musk said, I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I had to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful. And he even said we are summoning the demon. And yeah, we now have these very, very powerful military AI cyber infrastructures that are interfering with our society every day. And there is predictive policing, so even before you would do something wrong, you'd be locked away. Moreover, there's karma police. And karma police is basically reducing your life to one number which reflects the value of your personality from the point of view of those who govern. And what would go into this value, your social network of friends, your behavior, the news you have clicked, are you critical about the government or not, the videos you've watched online, don't tell me what you've been watching in the past years, even the music that you listen to. This is what's happening, and now we even have censorship and ministries of truth. So to summarize it, we're living in a world where technology has surpassed what's described in 1984 in Brave New World. Mass surveillance is here. You're all being profiled and targeted. There's big nudging, that means behavioral manipulation. There's a citizen score and karma police. There's predictive policing, censorship, war games, and I should add destabilization of political regimes, cyber warfare in a sense against the own population and maybe against our democracy. And all of that, of course, shouldn't happen. There is a universal declaration of human rights, which should protect your privacy. There's also a study about privacy in the digital age, and yes, it should be protected. That would be the job of our politicians. Well, that's what they're being paid for. Then China, among others, are being criticized for the citizen score because it's establishing, as many people think, a totalitarian kind of state. And the Supreme Court has said there's no excuse to censor any speech, not even hate speech. Free speech is absolutely protected. And yeah, this is a translation of that digital manifesto, appeared in Scientific American. We need to ask these questions. Will democracy survive big data and artificial intelligence? Because democracy is under attack. Some people have said democracy is an outdated technology. It has produced wealth, health, and happiness for billions of people all over the world, but now we want to try out something new for whatever reason. And it's not so clear what they're planning to try out. Peter Thiel says we're in a deadly race between politics and technology, and he thinks that technology should win. There shouldn't be politics any longer. Larry Page said there are a lot of things I would like to do, but we can't do because they're illegal. The question is, are they happening anyway? Tony Blair started to ask, is democracy dead? Is it a model that's running out of time? It's being asked. And then it's just like, yes, it's basically coming to an end. And suddenly there are people who say, we want to write history, we want to create a new kind of society. And in this case, China is more attractive than the West. That means democracy would be replaced by a Chinese system. This guy is claiming that the best governance form is a direct technocracy. IBM has proposed IBM Watson to run the United States. Mark Zuckerberg has imperial ambitions, and Google wants to reprogram the state. That means they're creating operating system, not just for computers and smartphones, but for an entire society, for maybe the entire world. You know, this is what companies are now working on. And this is the manipulation superpower that they have at present. So, pretty impressive. So, since when is all of this happening? Well, most likely, at least since 2010, the Arab Spring was often framed as Twitter revolution. So, some people say here, the newsfeed have been manipulated in such a way that those political regimes would be destabilized. And then they use the very same technology basically in their own countries, right? And that's why the predictions of the elections don't work any longer. So swarm intelligence has been undermined, and elections have been manipulated in South America. This is very clear. And most likely in other countries too, where people were surprised about the outcomes. Pretty impressive outcomes that didn't match actually previous opinion polls. But we know how Obama won his elections because he is basically reported about this. He had a very big data team, 45 data analytics people. and they knew who would vote for whom and who was undecided and who could be basically nudged to vote for him. And then Trump did the same thing, and everyone got upset suddenly. Now what we can say is our society is at a crossroad, right? Digital transformation will create something new. It could be communism 2.0, benevolent dictatorship, and I think there's no benevolent dictatorship, but anyway, they call it like this. So the government believes to know better than you what's good for you and would tell you to do it otherwise. Minus points, low citizen score, less resources, less rights. Or feudalism 2.0, surveillance capitalism, or fascism 2.0. Of course, it could also be democracy 2.0, but at the moment, it doesn't look like this if you don't change the course of events by your own action. We see already in Poland that democracy has transformed quite a bit, and the same thing in Hungary, in France, in Turkey. So maybe it's time to say, stop. Self-determination, freedom, human dignity, assumed innocence, all of these kind of things, pluralism, democracy, participation are at stake. And where are we heading? Well, post-fact society, fact-free, a fact-free world, and that brings us back again to 1984. In the time of the sea, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. You would find very similar statements in today's politics. So, Obama has warned us of this when he was still the most powerful man on earth, as people say, but he couldn't do anything about this. What he said was, this is also a time around the world when some of the fundamental ideals of liberal democracies are under attack, and when notions of objectivity and of a free press and of facts and of evidence are trying to be undermined or in some cases ignored entirely. Now, we're living in a data-driven society, you know. It's not meaning that we're paying more attention to facts. It means that we're paying less attention to facts, you know. Very bad development. In such a climate, it's not enough just to give people a megaphone. So powerful are those manipulation tools. In fact, they're now starting to rewrite history. Again, George Orwell said, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And here is an example of real-time reenactment of videos. That means you can change movies as you play them.
New real-time face swapping software may make it nearly impossible to determine whether or not a video clip of someone reportedly saying something is actually real or whether it has been manufactured. The software is being developed by Stanford University and is a more advanced version of the popular face swap feature on Snapchat, which allows people to digitally switch their faces for a few seconds if they're both pictured in the frame. But this software is so advanced, using just an ordinary webcam in real time, it maps the facial expressions of the target onto another person's face. You can see here, this is an actual clip of President Obama giving a speech, and down here on the bottom is the reenactment. Almost impossible to tell that it's fake. This, mixed with voice swapping software, will make it nearly impossible to determine whether or not a video clip that you see is actually real or not. This opens the door to massive fraud. Rapper R.A. the Rugged Man just tweeted out a picture or a video clip of somebody using face swapping software on him saying, "This is creepy. They used to bootleg my music. Now they're bootlegging my face." And again, this is from just a primitive version. The Stanford University software, much more advanced. This kind of a software is what was used to reenact John F. Kennedy appearing to meet and greet Forrest Gump, played by Tom Hanks in the popular 1990s film. And similar software has been used to digitally resurrect celebrities, as John Wayne was pictured in this Coors Light commercial. And you may recall recently that Paul Walker was digitally resurrected with a digital replica to finish Fast and Furious 7, since he died tragically partway through the filming. This system obviously will be abused, and the fact that it's so convincing now shows that a future version will likely be almost impossible for anyone other than some forensic analysts to determine whether or not a video clip is real or not. In fact, this same kind of fraud was suggested to be used on Saddam Hussein before the first Gulf War. The CIA had actually floated the idea of making fake footage of appearing to be Saddam Hussein doing something embarrassing in order to try to discredit him. But now the Stanford face-to-face real-time face capture and reenactment software is putting that kind of power into the hands of everyone. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new. Check out some of the previous videos. Over 2,000.
Yeah, the same thing happens actually with voice. So it's just possible to put into your mouth all sorts of things you've never said.
So as you can see, we have the audio waveform above it, and we have the text under it. And when we play back, the text and audio should play back at the same time. So let's try it.
And I kiss my dogs and my wife.
It's actually easy. We can just type the word dogs here.
And I kiss my wife and my dogs.
We can actually type something that's not here. And here we go.
And I kiss Jordan and my dogs.
We're not just going to do with words. We can actually type small phrases. So let's say, okay, so we remove those words and we do 3 times.
Oh!
And play back.
And I kiss Jordan 3 times.
So you're not anymore the master of your own life's script. We have AI systems that are being used, of course, in all sorts of contexts, but obviously bots to deceive are the most common maybe at that time. Misinformation becomes ever more powerful, and if you look back actually into the past, then this is very concerning, because the invention of the printing press caused the 30 Years' War, over 8 million casualties. The invention and spreading of the radio, so-called Volksempfänger, through the Nazi regime, was probably one of the reasons why we ended up in World War II and 50 to 85 million people died. The question is, will we be able to get this under control before it gets out of control? Now, what you need to understand how this is being created. Our senses work in a way that they respond to information, to reflections, right? So this is a reflection of the Berlin Dome in the previous government building of the former GDR. What you see is the dome, not what happens behind the glass. So basically, creating reflections allows people to draw your attention to these reflections and get your attention away from other things that you're not supposed to see. These are the more important things, the more interesting things. You know, by shedding light on things, you can make things appear or disappear. That's kind of the trick that's being used. And very simple. You know, make people pay attention to something else and steal their property and their freedom and their human rights and their privacy and all of this. So this is the old way of doing it. To create attention to something that you should pay attention to and drawing your attention away from other things that they don't want you to see. TV is of course the next phase. And that is the phase that we have entered right now. Now virtual reality is next, and Pokemon Go. No, basically we are increasingly living in a matrix world. And it's not by mistake, it's by intention. Government programs have brought it on the way together with industries, the military industrial complex. Now the problem is that it becomes ever more difficult to think out of the box and have your own ideas. We have ended up in the internet trap. And I'm not the only one who has realized this. And people like Elon Musk and other billionaires are now convinced we're living in a matrix. They're trying to help break us free with initiatives such as OpenAI. And I think if we don't break free now, we won't be able to tell the difference anymore between truth and fake news. And that's an Apple advertisement from 1984 to guide your way.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory rules. Unification of the rules is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 20th.
That's it.
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Andrea.
I think that what you said is more or less what everyone knows in some way, not with all these details. But is there a way that you can see to avoid all this? I mean, because in some sense it seems like a kind of fate.
No, I don't think so. Actually, my next talk tomorrow will present a different digitization paradigm, which is directed at empowerment of people. And so basically, the suggestion that this is a technology-driven thing, and it's like a fate, and we have to accept that, and there's no alternative is not true. There are many different ways to create a digital society, but it's really important that you guide this process, that you design the digital platforms and technologies the right way to be compatible with our value system, with our constitution, and that can be done. But it will not happen if you don't push your politicians to take care of this, because they're being lobbied all the time by industrial interests that want to have this kind of reality. But what happens is they're getting rich at our cost. So basically, you know, they're taking away our data, our freedom, and our rights, and that's being redistributed between business and politics. So we're losing our power, we're losing our possibility to contribute to society, and it wouldn't have to be like this, right? So we have to defend our freedom, we have to speak up, we need to come up with alternative visions of the future and fight for it, not with weapons, but with words, with ideas, with solutions. And it didn't happen for a long time because we have been educated as consumers. We like all these products, you know, nothing to say against those products. I'm using them myself, right? But it has made us passive rather than creative in many cases, and that has to change. We have to become co-creators of that future digital society rather than just do what is told to us and click here, click there, do this, do that. You know, this is not human destiny, I would say.
Yes.
Nadir, once we had Agora, and the main aspect of living in an Agora, in open square, was that we had the possibility to touch each other. I mean, to look the people in the eyes, and really to understand, or try at least to understand the behavior of people that we have in front of us. But once again, I think that Antonio making the famous speech on the death of Caesar was perfectly aware to manipulate the facts and to give the people a complete different aspect of the truth, or at least to create the idea of something else.
It didn't end very healthy for Caesar, right?
Yeah.
He's now in our salad.
I mean, to make a democracy working, the most important thing is to make, as you say, the people alive. I mean, it's not question, they used to say that the sleep of reasons generate monsters. So if really want to have a democracy alive, it's necessary, as you just said, that we have to activate and we have to really participate.
Absolutely, yes.
And so the problem is, again, to use the big data and all the enormous potential we have from the internet of things, etc. And really, I fully agree with you to try to make our duty in be part of it. Because I think that the positive aspects of this enormous revolution, as you taught us during many lessons in other years, are maybe far more important than the worst. The problem is to try to maintain and to keep in this balance better, much better than worse.
I do think that we need new platforms that allow for real participation. I don't think Facebook is a governance platform. Certainly might be developed or turned into one, but it would need to have really a lot of additional features. And the question is, shouldn't that kind of platform be public, right? There's a very nice project at MIT called Deliberatorium, where they're organizing arguments of many people into argument streams, different perspectives on the problem, I think that can be very useful, and AI systems could also be used to help structure dialogue and to help to keep in the overview when many people interact with each other. So basically what everyone says adds to what other people have said before. But you know, these platforms haven't been finished yet. But I think that's what we really need to bring on the way pretty soon. Otherwise, I'm pessimistic about our future.
Yes.
What you have shown us seems a kind of evolution of perfect control from printing books, from television to digital control. But of course, the answer to this problem is pluralism.
Yes,
Many publishers,
absolutely.
many TV network, and so many digital platforms to avoid the control of just a few companies or political parties.
Or open up the existing platforms for pluralism. So imagine Google would allow you to choose between different algorithms. So then they wouldn't determine your view of the world. That you could look at their data basically in different ways and say, I want to see the world from an Italian point of view, or I want to see the world from a German point of view, or American, or Russian, or Chinese, or from a male or a female point of view, from a Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or atheist point of view. You know, it would all be possible to create these different filters, and by combining those different views, I think we would get a much better picture of the world. And if we would require Google to open up for this, they wouldn't make less money, but it would be much more useful for us and much more supportive of the pluralism that our world needs.
In other words, you are suggesting to anonymize the data, in some sense, of the source of the data.
I think the personalization should really depend on our opt-in, or at least we should be able to opt out. I would like to be able also to determine the degree of personalization. I think we are heading in a world towards a world where there's over-personalization, which is so effective that we would not even notice anymore that we're being manipulated. And that's dangerous, right? So if I want to avoid mistakes in my decision making, then I need to know that perhaps I'm currently being manipulated in my thinking and decision making. And that's why there are laws, by the way, that say, you know, you have to write advertisement if a company is trying to manipulate you, so you would be warned.
There's another question over there.
Yeah, I have two questions.
Can you speak louder?
Yeah, sorry. I have two questions. So the first one is about the truth. I mean, how you can decide if the videos, the fact, news is true or not. I mean, this problem there was always in the history of humanity. No? I mean, always the person. I mean, it's hard to say if a fact is true or not. It is like that in all the history of you. No? I mean, or not. I mean, this is an
Yes, but we always had means basically to verify or falsify. You know, previously we had to go to a library and look up scientific books or lexica, encyclopedias, and these kind of things. And later on, basically, the internet took over that job, and we started to trust Wikipedia and other sources. And now this is being undermined. So what should we do now, basically? That's the problem. We don't have.
Also before, I mean, some people wrote this scientific book that you could find in the library. So in principle, also the book that are in the library can contain some fake news. No? I mean,
It was the same.
yeah.
It was the same, but not so big data.
It was not so fast, it was not so voluminous, and it wasn't so manipulative, right? So it's really an entirely new quantity and quality, a new dimension.
200, 500 years ago, it was the same manipulating as we have now.
No, probably now
Can you
we have more
disagree?
democracy in manipulation.
Yes, I disagree, because
Manipulation.
most of the time we were not.
Don't see that, because we see that very fast. Now we can see very fast the manipulating, the advertisement, and we can write fast. But we are manipulating another for companies for revenue, because that's all working.
No, there are
In the
some
past,
differences. The frequency of manipulation has changed dramatically, right? Now people are opening up their smartphone at least 85 times a day. I've heard they're touching it more than 6,000 times. You know, that's the thing that we touch most. So really a much higher frequency of manipulation, a much higher efficiency because it's personalized.
The efficiency of life is even better when we think back. You can know news and papers and research papers in about 2 minutes, and
But we can't trust it anymore because now everything can be manipulated. Now, your newspaper in the future, and even today, partially depending on the newspaper, is being personalized. That means what you read on the newspaper and what your neighbor reads on the newspaper will be two different things. So you cannot be sure that the newspaper will be telling you the truth, and you will not be able to verify. There is no common basis anymore.
It's just a misunderstanding. I can check it, is it true or not?
How do you want to check it?
I can check it.
Huh?
Going to Google. Check in 3 or 4 or 5.
Now Google will display the stuff on top
How
that
many
some
display?
company has been
200,
paid
I
for.
can check 200 in 15 minutes. And 100 years ago, I can check 200 in about 7 days. News.
I mean, good
If I
luck.
understand it, sorry.
Another-
If I understand, is the question that you know the pluralism is important, but Google, you know, establish an order and it can take some of the pluralistic opinions out of your view.
Yes, I know.
So instead, if suppose the architecture forces you to have, you know, all this different point of view, every time you access an information, that's much different. You know, this I think what is the point. So so it's a, I would say there is a pluralism of opinion. There is also, I would say, a certain excellence. To say, if I am an expert of cancer that is saying something, and have published paper in Nature and Science and many journals, I mean, it's different if somebody else says different things and has not the authority. So, but if you have a pluralism of positions, like the one you said, you know, you have Protestant, Muslim, Christians, etc., and the Democrat, and etc., and German, and etc., then at least you know you can sort of search of those opinions something, and if all agree on the same thing, then you know maybe you want to say then you have some software, for example, to try to say the consensus, different opinions, and the authorities also. You know, you can try to say, well, this is an expert of this famous biologist. It's different from somebody from the street says the same thing. You know? But if some but it could be the other way around. You know, so I think the Google gives you a list of importance in terms of how many people have accessed this information and look at it, and it's different from the pluralism. I think this is the point. If I
I
understand.
mean, now we are also entering a time of robotic journalism, right? That's the next point. So there are a few people who can basically have written an infinite number of articles that will swamp Google, basically, right? That's the point. I've already had cases where I wanted to share a link showing a certain video with friends, and they saw something completely different. And, how do you want to create a common basis if the link would display something different?
Yeah.
Can I come to my second question also?
Yeah?
But what I'm saying is that, for example, in biology, Chris knows very well that there are, like 10 or 15% of the papers on Nature were reportedly false, because that's what happens when a result is given by a single lab. But if you have the same results proven by many different labs in the world, that's different. There's not been any false paper found with so many different labs, doing the same experiment. Sorry, that's what I wanted to talk about.
No, my second question is about mass media manipulations. I think that always in the democracy, also before the democracy, there was this mass media manipulation. Before the internet, the people get information from newspaper that I don't know how much they are, but 4 or 5 major newspapers owned by 2-3 companies. So, also before the internet era, there was this mass media manipulation.
Yeah, but it never ended well, right?
Yeah.
That's another good argument, right? If you want to end things well, if you want to have a good future, then we shouldn't let these kind of things happen. That, in fact, 6 media moguls basically own most of the big media in the world. So basically, they could already spread fake news in the past. That's absolutely true. And now eventually we realize how all that has been done, how we have been tricked and so on. But there's a major distrust problem coming upon society, right? If we can't trust any information source any longer, and it's hitting scientists too. There's now this criticism that says, oh, scientists have been influenced too much by businesses and doing the kind of research, coming up with the kind of results that businesses liked. And it's discrediting science overall now. It's a very dangerous development.
Can you elaborate?
There was enough. Yes, Chris.
What do you mean by that, I guess? As a scientist, I'm curious, what do you mean, too much focus funding of scientific research, or do you mean goals?
One thing is funding, so there's this selection of what's being published and what not. If you have a contract with industry, then in many cases there would be a clause saying, we want to see the paper in advance, and we could decide whether that gets a green light to be published or not. So that would bias results, of course. The other thing that biases results is that they would guide your attention, the kind of questions that are being asked would already be influenced by others. And again, that would lead to a situation where certain kind of problems wouldn't be looked at enough by people, right? So for example, we are now running into this new data-driven society, and people are claiming, we've lost privacy, forget about it, it will never be back, we've lost sovereignty, we have lost control, there's no accountability, it's all lost, basically, just go and live with it. How could it happen that over all these years, nobody was pointing to this problem and asking questions? It's a total failure of our societies that nobody was pointing out, oh, maybe there are implications for the one thing that is really most important from the point of view of our constitutions, which is human dignity. Sorry, we can't measure it, so we don't pay attention to it anymore, That's the kind of principle. So I'd like to ask you to find ways to measure human dignity with data, because once we are paying attention to this again in that digital age, I think there's a chance that it will survive, but currently it doesn't look very good.
Roberto?
Actually, I have a question about when you said that the point of the fake news is that, and manipulation is the fact that the frequency is very high in consideration of the information that we get from different sources. But actually, the same can be seen the other side of the coin. I mean, now we can check with a very high frequency every fact, in the sense that if someone says something, we can check very different sources in very in a small amount of time and discredit it in a faster way. I mean, you use it in the...
Yeah, we don't know who will win, you know. Is there still a chance basically to free ourselves in this way or not? But we can't rely that it would play out to our advantage, right? That's kind of, don't hope that by doing nothing it would end well. I think this is the time where you have to become active and write in newspapers, talk to politics, you know, make them wake up and change their mind and take action.
Yeah, but also, sorry, you should do more than just speak in this respect, because when Google started and everybody understood that the search engine of Google was so powerful, there was a kind of reaction here in Europe saying we should do something similar. And the only thing that came out was that the French government spent €500 million, gave it to Thomson for nothing, and nothing happened. So reality is that we have the tools to solve the problems, but we are not using it. I mean, Linux has existed as an open operating system that has been used and is being used. But the operating systems that we have on mobile phones belong to private entities, and nobody has managed to develop an operating system where your system manager is not a private entity, but is something less controlled by a single entity. You've been speaking about authenticity of content and information that is being spread. We have tools. There is blockchain solutions that you can use to sign and confirm that that information is coming from you and not from anybody else. And this could be in a public ledger and everybody can know this. But we are not using it. So we can complain, but what I'm saying is that if we don't do anything, and I'm totally in agreement with you, but something technical, not necessarily political. The politicians, they exploit what they have at their ease, what is simpler to do. When you want to do something from the engineering world, like it has been done for blockchain, blockchain is a matter of engineers, is a matter of computer scientists, and now it's out of control. They know that they cannot stop it. So now they are looking at how to use it, how to manipulate it, etc. But it's in our hands. If we want to do something, we need to do it. And for making money in the end, because what survives is when you make money. Otherwise, the insurance policy will not exist, etc. So my simple plea is, yes, let's be scared, but let's also act. Otherwise, it will not work.
Right, I fully agree. I think that blockchain technology is an opportunity, but it not automatically frees the world. You know, you can also use it to enslave it just in a different way. So we need to pay attention how to use this. Yeah, but technological action is also very welcome. But the point is those smartphones keep us busy. And that's a strategy, because as long as you're busy with your smartphone, you won't get active. You won't come up with an alternative system. So it's wanted that you don't act, because that keeps the power with the people who have it at the moment, right? So starting to act means putting your smartphone away from time to time, to have time to think and to act and to do something, right? That is, I think, very important.
I think Alessandro has also a question.
Yes, I have a question here. from the point of view of our mind control and Big Brother effect, who do you think we should fear more? Governments, politicians, secret services, or corporations, Google, Facebook, because are two different things, or both of them, maybe.
I think it's an amalgamation effect, kind of, there's this military-industrial complex which is politically supported, and politics lets many things happen that are not constitutional because it creates benefits for them. And so there are quite a few people who are sitting kind of in the same boat here, but the even more powerful people are those who are actually creating the algorithm and configuring them. I think secret services would have to be much more transparent. And those people who hide behind politics, companies, and secret services, which are a few families that have been very powerful for hundreds of years, you know. And they control the money system too. And I think if we want to have new innovation happen, then also we need to have a new money and innovation system. Because it's true that as long as there are a few people who have all the investment dollars in their hands decide what kind of innovation will be supported and what wouldn't see the light of the day, they will not allow innovations to happen that are not consistent with their previous business models, right? So certain kind of disruptive innovation that are not wanted will not happen even if they would save the world. That's the problem.
The last question of Dino, because and then close, because otherwise, you know.
Certainly, very quickly to say that perfectly on the same wavelength. Sorry,
Antonio.
In the sense that I really believe that to be impactful as scientists and such technology, we really now have somehow the duty of providing examples of grassroots solution that could be game changer. One issue you also mentioned is personal information management system. I do believe that we can create very trustful technologies for empowering individual possibility of grasping the knowledge from data, and this would be shorter than we think a big game changer. And yet the story is we have many ideas on how to create ecosystems for news, for knowledge circulation that can be based on truth management and trust. We know how to build better reputation system. We know how to build public ledger technologies like blockchain and certain ecosystem. For example, Wikipedia, right? Something which was created with something objective in mind. Eventually, find a way to work where the good is prevail over the bad. It prepares much better than one would have expected, right? In other situations, like in public situation like news or Facebook, this does not happen. We see polarization, we see fake news, and because the system has not been taught as a public, utility system. It's another kind of, goal. It's another kind of technology. We can re-engineer better systems that actually have a kind of public good thing inscribed by design into these technologies. We can do that, and we need to provide examples of that, because I believe history can really be written on the right side. I believe that for all the elite to somehow converge towards a single centralized system, in the meantime, I think, because this is very difficult to do, in the meantime we have time to go on the opposite direction and we have much more democratic technology.
So in conclusion, for it to end well for us, we need to act in one way or another. All right.